In the world of money, fortunes are made and destroyed in the blink of an eye, but few journeys capture the imagination. Quite like a solid stock market, rags to riches story. And this story is not just about charts, numbers, or Wall Street jargon. It's about human struggle, the hunger for survival, and the daring risks that turn ordinary people into millionaires or leave them broken. Today we trace one such story, a story of despair, courage, and the relentless pursuit of wealth in the unforgiving arena of the stock market. That's how the legend begins.
Before we dive deeper into this incredible stock market rags to riches story, could you make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell? On this channel we bring you the most powerful rags to riches journeys, real stories of struggle, resilience, and triumph that you won't find anywhere else. Don't miss the next life-changing story. Subscribe now and let's continue.
Part 1. The Spark in the Shadows. But before the millions, before the skyscraper views and tailored suits, there was darkness. A cluttered apartment, dimly lit by the glow of a cheap laptop screen. The man who would one day be hailed as a self-made market prodigy sat hunched over, staring at charts he barely understood. The flicker of red and green candles felt like a cruel joke. Numbers danced, but none of them seemed to move in his favor. His name was Daniel. He wasn't born rich, he wasn't even born into comfort. Raised in the working-class edges of a city that never cared if you succeeded or failed, Daniel carried the weight of an ordinary family. Bills overdue, parents tired from shift work, dreams deferred because survival came first. The stock market? It was never meant for people like him. That was for the elite, the ones with Ivy League ties and trust funds, the ones who could lose $10,000 and laugh it off over martinis. Daniel, on the other hand, had scraped together a measly $1,500, his entire savings, and decided this was it. This was his one chance to break the cycle. But as the weeks dragged on, all he saw was loss. Every trade seemed cursed. Buy in the morning, lose by night. Hope in the afternoon, despair by midnight. His account balance bled slowly, like a wound that refused to close. And yet he couldn't walk away. Why? Because every now and then he caught a glimpse, a flicker of potential. A single trade that doubled his money in minutes, only to vanish on the next. Those moments whispered something dangerous into his ear. You could win. You could make it. You just need to understand the game. And so obsession took root. Daniel stopped seeing friends. His meals became coffee and instant noodles. The floor of his room was littered with printouts of candlestick patterns, scribbled notes, and half-read trading books borrowed from the library. His phone rang constantly with overdue payment reminders. The tension in his chest felt permanent. Then came the breaking point. It was a rainy Thursday night. His bank balance read $243. This was it, the last of his money. He stared at his trading screen, tears burning his eyes. "You're a fool," he told himself. "This was never for you." He hovered his finger over the withdrawal button, ready to admit defeat. But something stopped him. A single line in one of those dusty trading books flashed in his mind. Markets punish the impatient, they reward the relentless. Relentless. That word clung to him like oxygen in a drowning sea. He decided, not tonight, not yet. Instead of quitting, Daniel doubled down, not with money, but with discipline. He woke up the next morning at 5 a.m. He began paper trading, practicing strategies without risking cash. He rewrote his notes, discarded the junk advice, and focused on the fundamentals: risk management, patience, timing. He studied the psychology of greed and fear. The more he learned, the more he saw the truth. The stock market wasn't random chaos. It was human emotion, charted on the screen. Fear drove crashes. Greed fueled rallies. Patterns repeated because people repeated mistakes. And slowly a shift began. When he returned to live trading weeks later, something was different. He wasn't chasing anymore. He wasn't gambling. He was calculating, waiting, striking like a predator instead of prey. The first time he made $100 and didn't instantly lose it back, he felt a strange calm instead of euphoria. For the first time, control replaced chaos. But the road ahead wasn't smooth. For every breakthrough, the market had a way of pulling him back into the mud. False rallies, fake breakouts, gut-wrenching crashes, they tested his will. Yet each failure sharpened him. Each loss became a lesson carved into his soul. And then came the trade. A small biotech company, barely making headlines. Everyone ignored it. Everyone except Daniel. He had spent days analyzing the charts, reading the filings, sensing something big was brewing. And when the news broke, an FDA approval that sent the stock soaring, Daniel was already in position. His $243 became $1,200 in a single day. He stared at the screen, heart pounding, hands shaking. For most people, it wasn't life-changing money. But for Daniel, it was proof. Proof that he wasn't crazy, that the dream wasn't a fantasy. Proof that he could play this game and win. But little did he know this was just the beginning. Ahead lay the storms of margin trading, the temptations of greed, the wolves of Wall Street ready to devour reckless traders. Ahead lay nights darker than any he had faced yet, and victories brighter than he dared imagine. This wasn't luck. This wasn't chance. This was the first chapter of a true stock market rags to riches story. And the next chapter would test not only his wallet, but his very soul. Part 2. The Price of Greed. Every great stock market rags to riches story has a moment where the dream starts to feel real. For Daniel, that moment was the day his account grew from $243 to $1,200 in one trade. It was intoxicating. He stared at the screen as if he had hacked the system. The same market that once laughed at him now seemed to bend in his favor. His chest swelled with pride. He didn't just make money. He outsmarted millions of traders, investors, and analysts. He, the broke kid from nowhere, had won. But success can be dangerous. It whispers lies. It tells you that you're special, invincible, chosen. Daniel believed the whispers. Over the next few weeks, his cautious strategies gave way to bold trades. He started taking bigger positions, chasing faster gains. The discipline that once kept him grounded slowly eroded. And when a friend casually mentioned margin accounts, borrowing money from the broker to amplify trades, Daniel's eyes lit up. Why play small, he thought, when I could multiply my winnings? So he opened a margin account. Suddenly, his $1,200 felt like $6,000, a fortune compared to where he began. He dove in headfirst, leveraging every trade. At first, it worked. His account doubled in 2 weeks. He couldn't sleep, not because of stress, but because of excitement. He was riding high, dreaming of yachts and penthouses. His notebooks now filled with not just strategies, but lists of the cars he'd buy, the vacations he'd take, the life he was certain awaited him. But the market doesn't reward arrogance. It punishes it, brutally. One fateful morning, Daniel woke up to headlines screaming panic, a trade war announcement. The market opened with a violent drop. His leveraged positions, once comfortably green, bled red instantly. Within minutes, his broker's dreaded email arrived. Margin call. He scrambled, panicked, clicking frantically as his account balance shrank before his eyes. $6,000, $3,000, $1,500. Gone. By the time the dust settled, all that remained was $612. half of his gains erased in a single morning. He sat frozen, sweat dripping down his forehead, his heart racing like it might burst. The room spun. It wasn't just the money he lost, it was the illusion, the belief that he was in control. For hours he sat in silence. His laptop screen glowed in the dark, mocking him. He thought about quitting again, about walking away before he lost everything. But then, in the quiet, came a realization. He had made one fatal mistake. He had betrayed his own rules. Daniel had started with discipline, patience, and strategy. But greed had replaced reason, and the market punished him for it. He vowed it would never happen again. So he returned to the grind. He studied risk like a surgeon studies anatomy. He learned that the greatest traders weren't the ones who struck gold on lucky trades, but the ones who managed losses so they could survive long enough to win again. He created a new rule for himself: never risk more than 2% of his account on any trade. No exceptions. No shortcuts. It was agonizing at first. The gains were slower, smaller, but the losses, too, were manageable. For the first time, Daniel felt something stronger than excitement, stability, and then the breakthrough came. Daniel discovered options trading, contracts that could multiply gains if timed correctly. Most traders feared them, but Daniel studied them with obsession. He realized that with options he could control large amounts of stock with a fraction of the capital, without the crushing danger of margin debt. He tested it, one trade, then another, slowly, carefully, like dipping his toes into icy water. And when the trades hit, the profits dwarfed anything he had ever made before. Within 6 months, his $612 grew into $9,000. Not millions, not life-changing, but more money than he had ever seen in his own account. Still, success brought new enemies. Friends he hadn't spoken to in years suddenly called him, asking for tips. Online forums ridiculed him when he shared ideas. And then came the predators, so-called gurus, who promised secret strategies for thousands of dollars. Daniel ignored them all. He trusted no one. The market had already taught him the cost of listening to the wrong voices. But as his account grew, so did his ambition. He began eyeing bigger trades, riskier plays. He told himself he was disciplined, but deep down, he knew the hunger for wealth was gnawing at him again. And then came the opportunity that would change everything. A small electric car company, struggling in the shadows of giants, released a quiet earnings report. No one cared. The media dismissed it. But Daniel saw something in the numbers, growth hidden beneath the surface, demand no one was paying attention to. He placed his biggest options trade yet. The risk was terrifying. One wrong move and months of progress could vanish. The night before earnings, he barely slept. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, every nerve in his body on fire. If he was right, this could catapult him into a new league. If he was wrong, he would crash back to nothing. At 9:30 a.m. the next morning, the market opened, and in an instant, Daniel's life changed forever. Part 3. The Trade That Changed Everything. The clock struck 9:30 a.m. on Wall Street, and Daniel's palms were slick with sweat. He sat hunched over his laptop, his eyes locked on the green and red candles flashing on the screen. This wasn't just another trade. This was a trade, the one that could make or break him. The company? A little-known electric car manufacturer that the media mocked, analysts ignored, and big money laughed at. But Daniel had seen something in the earnings preview. A whisper of demand, a hint of expansion. He had gone all in on call options, betting the stock would soar. His heart thudded against his ribs. At first, the stock wavered, a dip, a pause, uncertainty. Daniel's stomach sank. Then, a press release hit the newswire. Sales had tripled. International demand was exploding. The stock didn't climb, it erupted. 5%, 10%, 20%. Daniel's options exploded in value, multiplying every dollar tenfold. His account balance jumped so violently that he blinked twice, wondering if it was a glitch. But the euphoria was cut with fear. Should he sell now? Take the win and walk away? Or hold longer and risk it all collapsing? Voices battled in his head. The greedy whisper, hold. It could double again. The cautious one, get out now. Don't repeat the margin call disaster. He hovered over the sell button, his finger trembling. Then, as the stock hit a 30% surge, he clicked, sold. The screen updated. His balance froze at $86,430. Daniel fell back in his chair, his chest heaving. He laughed. He cried. He punched the air. He had done it. He had turned a few $100s, once destined to disappear, into nearly 6 figures. But success changes people, and with success comes attention. Word of Daniel's win spread quickly through online forums. Some hailed him as a genius. Others mocked him as lucky. Strangers began messaging him daily, begging for tips. He ignored most of them, but the noise was deafening. Then came the call that would test him like never before. An old acquaintance, Victor, a slick-talking trader with connections, reached out. Victor had heard of Daniel's big win and claimed to have inside information on a biotech company awaiting FDA approval. This is the next Tesla, man, Victor said. You've got momentum, I've got the intel. Together, we'll kill it. Daniel's pulse quickened. The temptation was overwhelming. If true, this could turn his $86,000 into millions overnight. But he also remembered every lesson the market had taught him, especially the rule: never trust anyone else's conviction more than your own. Still, doubt crept in. Was he really smart or just lucky? Maybe Victor's offer was the key to crossing into the big leagues. For nights, he wrestled with the decision, his notebook filled with pros and cons, charts and scribbled warnings. Don't chase. Trust your plan. In the end, Daniel made a choice that shocked even himself. He told Victor no, and instead he doubled down on his own path. Research, patience, discipline. That single decision saved him, because weeks later the biotech company imploded. The FDA rejected its drug. The stock tanked 80% overnight. Traders who followed Victor were ruined. Daniel? He had stayed safe. His faith in himself solidified. He wasn't just a gambler anymore. He was becoming something rare, a disciplined trader who could survive the chaos of Wall Street. By the end of the year, Daniel's account crossed $250,000. He had gone from scraping coins for food to $250,000, a transformation most people wouldn't believe unless they saw it with their own eyes. But with new wealth came new shadows. The IRS wanted answers. Family members he hadn't heard from in years reached out with emergencies, and deep inside, Daniel knew something dangerous. The market had given him riches before, but it could just as easily take them back. And soon it would test him with the hardest trial yet, one that no strategy book, no risk rule, and no option contract could protect him from. Part 4. The Fall. By now, Daniel was no longer just a trader, he was a symbol. In online forums, his story circulated like wildfire. The kid who turned nothing into a fortune. On social media, his screenshots were shared, his trades dissected. Some called him a prodigy, others called him reckless. But fame, even in the shadows of trading, is dangerous. One morning, Daniel woke to a message that made his stomach drop. Notice of audit, Internal Revenue Service. He froze. He had barely filed taxes properly in the past. let alone accounted for six-figure trading profits. His stomach twisted. The very money that had saved him might now destroy him. The next weeks blurred into a haze of paperwork, sleepless nights, and fear. His balance sheet looked like a battlefield. Wins, losses, options, all tangled. For the first time since his meteoric rise, Daniel thought, maybe I'm not ready for this. And then, as if the IRS pressure wasn't enough, the market turned against him. It started with a whisper of inflation. Then came interest rate hikes. Stocks that had only known up suddenly plunged. Tech giants collapsed. Growth stocks, Daniel's bread and butter, bled red. Every morning his portfolio shrank. $250,000, $210,000, $170,000. He told himself it was just a correction. He told himself to stay strong, but deep down, fear clawed at him. What if this wasn't temporary? What if he lost everything? In desperation, he broke his own rules. He chased risky trades, bought into hype, and tried to make back losses quickly. The same discipline that had protected him vanished under the weight of greed and panic. And then, the final blow. One trade, one company, one decision. A startup in artificial intelligence that everyone was hyping. He put in $50,000, nearly a quarter of his wealth, on leveraged options, betting it would skyrocket after earnings. The earnings call came. The numbers disappointed. The CEO spoke nervously. The stock collapsed. Daniel stared at his screen in horror as his $50,000 became $5,000 in minutes. His hands shook, his vision blurred. He felt like he was back at square one. Only now the fall was from far higher. He punched the desk, screamed at the walls, cursed at himself. How had he let it happen? He knew the rules. He knew better. Yet he had ignored it all. The same friends who cheered his rise now whispered that he was finished. Some mocked him online, others vanished altogether. The messages of admiration turned into warnings. See? It was luck. He was never that good. For days, Daniel didn't trade. He didn't eat much. He barely slept. The glow of his screen, once a symbol of freedom, now looked like a prison. And then came the message that twisted the knife deeper. It was from his mother. She had heard of his wealth. She asked for help, medical bills, rent, a lifeline. Her tone wasn't angry, but desperate. Daniel wanted to help her. But in that moment, staring at his shrunken account, he felt powerless. Rich one day, broken the next. The weight of guilt crushed him. He realized the truth. This wasn't just about money. This was about who he was becoming. For months, he had chased the market for validation, letting greed and fear dictate his every move. He had forgotten the reason he started. Not fame, not glory, but freedom. Something inside him snapped. He shut the laptop. He turned off his phone. He walked outside into the night air, for the first time in weeks really breathing. And in that silence, Daniel made a vow. He would rise again, not as a gambler, not as a lucky winner, but as a master of the market. And when he did, it wouldn't just be about getting rich. It would be about taking control of his life permanently. But Wall Street wasn't done with him yet, because the next opportunity that crossed his path would be bigger than anything he'd ever seen, and far more dangerous. Part 5. The Rise of the Phoenix. The world of trading had chewed Daniel up and spit him out. But in the ashes of his failure, something new was born. For weeks after his collapse, Daniel disappeared from the noise. No social media. No trading forums, no boasting screenshots, just silence. Instead of chasing the market, he studied it. Every chart, every economic cycle, every mistake he had made. He devoured biographies of legendary investors, Jesse Livermore, Warren Buffett, Ray Dalio. he discovered one brutal truth they all agreed on. The market rewards discipline, not desperation. And for the first time, Daniel understood. So he rebuilt himself. He cut expenses, sold unnecessary luxuries, and built a war chest. Instead of wild bets, he focused on risk management. He promised himself one rule above all: never risk more than you can afford to lose. Then came 2020. The world was paralyzed by a pandemic. Fear ruled the markets. Stocks crashed at speeds unseen in decades. To the average person, it looked like the end. But Daniel, he saw blood in the streets. He remembered Buffett's words: be fearful when others are greedy, and greedy when others are fearful. One by one, he bought beaten-down giants, airlines, banks, tech companies, at prices that looked absurd. Friends told him he was insane. The news said the economy was finished, but Daniel held his ground. And then it happened. Stimulus checks flooded the system. Central banks slashed rates. Money poured into markets like a tidal wave. Stocks soared. The very companies Daniel had bought doubled, tripled, even quadrupled in value. His portfolio, once broken, once a graveyard, exploded past $1 million for the first time. But this time he didn't brag, he didn't post, he didn't gamble. He diversified. He invested in real estate, startups, and even built a fund to help other small traders learn discipline before chasing hype. And with that discipline came a deeper kind of wealth, peace of mind. The boy who once traded in a cramped apartment now rang the bell at the New York Stock Exchange as a guest of honor. The kid who once feared answering his mother's calls now paid off her mortgage in full. From rags to riches, Daniel had done the impossible, not by luck, not by gambling, but by surviving the storm and mastering it. His story spread beyond trading circles. Documentaries were made, students studied his journey, and every time Daniel was asked how he made it, he gave the same answer: I stopped chasing quick money. I stopped trading for ego. I stopped fighting the market and started learning from it. And so the legend was sealed. A story not of a lucky bet, not of overnight fortune, but of resilience, failure, and rebirth. Because in the end, Daniel's greatest trade wasn't stocks. It was himself. The boy who once had nothing had become more than just rich. He had become free. And that, truly, is the ultimate stock market rags to riches story. Now here's the real question. Was this journey a masterclass in smart investing, a stroke of pure luck, or proof that the system is built for only a few to win? What do you think? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm diving into your debates. And if you want more powerful rags to riches stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and join the journey.